Hello everybody and welcome to today's CAS Inspire webinar called CAS Inspire Inspirational Ideas for Computing in EYFS, a subject very close to my heart, so I'm looking forward to this. My name is Alison Sheldon and I'm the host for this session, and I'm also joined by my colleague Will Franklin, who will be moderating today's session and bringing your questions to today's panel. That's if time allows. During this session, please use the question window on the right hand side of your screen to ask any questions. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If using social media, the hashtag for the event is hashtag CAS Inspire. So without further ado, I will introduce the panel for this afternoon. I'm delighted to be joined by Rachel Coulthart and Amanda Hubble. Rachel has been teaching for 30 years and still thinks it's the best job in the world. She teaches mainly in early years, see that's why she thinks it's the best job in the world, but dabbles in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 computing. And Amanda is a teacher, senior leader and specialist leader of education at Alfreton Nursery School, beautiful part of the world. She has been a computing lead for over 20 years and drives the computing agenda in school through a focus on computational thinking and language. And we're going to start this evening with Amanda. So I'm just going to change presenter so that Amanda can share her screen. Okay, Amanda. Off you go.
Okay, so can everybody see that? Are we okay?
Yes.
Great. All right. So, yeah, how to apply computational thinking and language into the everyday early years curriculum. So that's a very broad scope. So what I obviously intend to look at today is how we choose to do that in school and hopefully inspire as we go along. So. It's a whistle-stop tour, so here we go. Different materials can obviously support unplugged teaching, and despite the fact that often we will feel that books are less used once we start talking about computing, I certainly find that there are some amazing books out there for little ones that really do explain and break down the coding and computing agenda with children. So we do have quite a lot of books around, and actually you can find codes and algorithms in all stories. And in fact, a story from our perspective would become an algorithm because of the fact that if you read the story every day and use the same words and the same pictures, then the story never changes. So on a very simplistic level, we use stories as within that computational thinking all the time. We base our computing agenda on the barefoot concepts and approaches, and that's what I shall be sort of unpicking a little bit today. So really what we try to do is use the language of computing alongside the normal language that children are used to every day, so that just puts a real context behind it. And logic is simply thinking. So we will talk to the children about the fact that, oh, come on, we've got to get our logic going now. Come on, let's get our thinking brains on it. And it's just about actually integrating that language within the normal sentence flow when you're actually communicating with children. So we try to keep it as simple and lacking complexity as we possibly can. And, you know, I think from an algorithm point of view, obviously we do apply that to the idea of computers and robots. And we have a little guy, Rusty, who is in school, and he has his own lunchbox. And the children are taught quite quickly that Rusty cannot eat the same food that they eat. He can only eat algorithms, and therefore when we're giving him his pack up for the day, we need to be able to put algorithms into his lunchbox, not sandwiches. So the children then start to think about what that algorithm could possibly be, and we use the natural world as much as we use anything else in school to try to illustrate that for the children. So nature's algorithms, phases of the moon, life cycles, days of the week, day and night, seasons of the year, time, growth and decay, recycling, and the list is endless. So the idea that actually that frog spawn, if you follow this cycle through, is never ever going to result in an elephant. And that's the point for us. So we're talking about following a series of instructions, a pattern, and actually at the end of it, the same outcome can be guaranteed. So Tuesday will always come after Monday, and it will always come before Wednesday, and that is never ever going to change. We will always have winter after autumn, and it's those sorts of everyday algorithms that children are learning about anyway. We're teaching children this constantly, so by applying one extra word, we can actually bring that to life in a computational thinking and language sort of a way. But then we sort of help the children to understand that it's not detached, it's not something that's just out there. An algorithm isn't something that happens to everybody else. An algorithm actually becomes personal to them too, and that we all have our own algorithms. We may have our own breakfast time algorithm, our bedtime algorithm. Is there a particular sequence of events in your day that you repeat day after day after day? So for a child, we may talk about the fact that we have breakfast, but what do we do before breakfast? So we wake up in the morning, then we get out of bed. Do we get dressed first? Do we have a breakfast first? Do we have a wash and clean our teeth first? And actually that could differ from child to child, but that's our own personal algorithm. The same with our school day, and that can break down into the classroom. So a classroom will have its own algorithm too for certain points during a day. So it's helping children to actually own this and to become a part of their own algorithm, and that brings it to life for them all the more. And we tend to find really that decomposition and algorithms go hand in hand, because once you start to look at something like baking, in order to understand how that cake was made, you're going to have to go backwards and undo it. So you're going to have to look at those ingredients. And so we're decomposing the cake. But then when you go forwards and you put all those ingredients back in place, you're creating an algorithm in order to make the cake. So the decomposition and the algorithms tend to go hand in hand. So Cubetto, we've had to decompose cat to get Cubetto, but when you put Cubetto together, it's always going to say cat. It's never going to say moose. So it is that sense of repetition, but the fact that these two are sort of friends, they go hand in hand together. They're partners in crime, our decomposition and algorithms. From our perspective, it's how we approach it. So again, if you put that Lego together, in exactly the same way every single time, it will always create that vehicle. And if you draw that tree using the same pencil and you put the same marks down on that paper every single time, you will always have that same tree. And then when you look at patterns, predictability, repetition, it's all very cross-curricular. And again, it's creating the algorithm. So you can look at camouflage, science, again, back into nature, looking at the patterns that are around us all the time. Patterns in numbers, patterns in architecture, patterns in expressive art and design. So again, from that cross-curricular point of view, there isn't anywhere that you can't find computational thinking. There is a slot for it wherever you want to put it, and it's real. It isn't tokenistic, it isn't forced. It's actually there waiting for you to just pick up on it. Abstraction is where we tend to have a little bit of fun. So, Christmas presents, Easter eggs. If you want to get to the chocolate, then you're going to have to do some abstraction, because we really don't want to eat the box. We don't want to eat the foil that's wrapping the egg up. We need to get to that chocolate as quick as we can. Sometimes we'll have the messy monster. We'll walk into a room and it will be absolutely trashed. There will be stuff everywhere, and the messy monster has visited. Oh my goodness, right, okay, so we've got this huge amount of information in front of us, but we've now got to abstract and take away the stuff that we don't need. So let's just sort the bricks out. Let's not look at anything else. Let's move that away, just the bricks. Now we know where the bricks go. Let's get those away. Right, next, move to the next thing. So now let's put all the balls away. And even in a room where maybe we're thinking that we would like to build a tower, but we've got to select out of all these resources, what do we actually want to use to make that tower? So we're abstracting, because we're looking at all the detail around us, and then we're removing everything that's unnecessary. The evaluation is just thinking back, reflecting on it, asking those lovely questions. Well, I wonder what would happen if we did that again. I wonder why that happened. The stuff that as early years practitioners we do without even thinking. We do all of this stuff without having to use too much creative thinking around it, because it's a natural part of how we converse with children. And basically we use all of the barefoot approaches in order to apply all of those concepts. So if we're putting an algorithm into Rusty's sandwich box, we will be tinkering with that algorithm. We'll be creating it. We might be debugging it because we might have gone a bit wrong, so it needs fixing. We'll be working together and collaborating. So all of those things, that perseverance, that debugging, that collaborating, creating, tinkering, all of it comes together in order to actually apply the concepts. So approaches and concepts, again, are hand in hand. Whistle stop tour, as I said. So yeah, to conclude, that's how we apply computational thinking and language in our everyday early years curriculum at Alfreton Nursery School.
Oh, thank you. Do you know, Amanda, that was brilliant. I love the explanation of abstraction, because that's one that I sometimes struggle with, you know, thinking, how am I going to do this with 33-year-olds? But the way you explained it, yeah, I can really see how I can move forward with that. So thank you very much. So what I'll do now is, Rachel, I'll change presenter so that you can present. Okay, Rachel, you're now presenter.
All right. So can you see
We've got plenty of time, so don't worry.
It's telling me I'm sharing my screen, but I can't see it.
Yeah, we've got developing children's understanding of algorithms through unplugged activities.
Excellent, good. I'm glad you can see.
Like I say, there's no rush, take as long as you need.
Okay, well, thank you, Amanda. You know, Amanda, I really see as the queen of unplugged computing, and much of what I have learnt from Amanda. So what you will shortly see my Rusty the robot, because that was an idea I took from Amanda and developed in my setting. So we are a one-form entry JMI with a nursery, and we've been doing some computational thinking and unplugged activities in our early years for a few years now. So yeah, that reminder about, you know, algorithms are everywhere. We talk a lot about everyday algorithms in our nursery, in our reception class, and we use that word with them. We're not afraid to introduce them to some big vocabulary, because the more they hear it in early years, the more confident they're going to be able to use it further up the school when they start to do computing. And as Amanda said, it's not tokenistic. It doesn't have to be forced. It's there every day for you to pick up and use. So this is one example of one of our everyday algorithms. So we create a poster for our home time algorithm, our process that we go through when we're getting ready for going home. And I use photographs of the children in the setting to create these posters, which is another really good way of making children feel that they're part of the classroom, part of that community. And so here is my Rusty. This is him there. So after hearing Amanda talk about how she used this robot to develop children's understanding of algorithms, I thought, what a great idea. So this is our Rusty. It's an old biscuit tin, and the children feed algorithms into Rusty because they know that a robot needs clear instructions to understand. It doesn't understand our language. And you'll see here children of boys, because it was mainly boys who got involved in this one, so it was a great way to engage in mark making. But here the child is explaining to Rusty, writing an algorithm for Rusty on how to use a padlock with the keys. Here the child is writing instructions for how Rusty should feed the guinea pigs, and these two boys here are writing instructions for Rusty to teach him how to count and do his numbers in nursery. So that was all their own ideas and things they thought that Rusty should know if he was going to be part of our nursery. Now, I also really like using a twister mat to introduce algorithms. And when I do this on courses with teachers, when they walk into the room and the twister mat's on the floor, it's a case of, oh, great, or oh no, what we've walked into here. But I have found it's a really good way to introduce children to this idea of a sequence of instructions that are very clear, very unambiguous. To start with, the children move themselves around the twister mat. Then one child will give them an instruction to move around the twister mat. Here the child was dressed up as the wolf from the story of the Three Little Pigs, was getting to the house of bricks. But it could be Goldilocks getting to the Three Bears cottage. It could be Kipper looking for his lost toy in his toy box. Whatever story you're doing, you can work in some of these algorithms, giving those sequence of instructions to get from A to B. I do also have tabletop versions, so it doesn't always have to be great big on the floor. Little Lego minifigures move quite nicely around those. And what I discovered recently as well is these little dots that the children use. Now, I used to use these later on with children once they've got the idea of how to give a sequence instructions. But recently we've got a child in nursery who's non-verbal, who's choosing not to speak at the moment. But she was sat there watching the activity happen with a couple of children, and she then looked like she wanted to have a go. So I said, oh, would you like to give instructions? And I used these. So she used the coloured dots to give instructions non-verbally. And so that's something I used to move on to a bit later. But you can see here, so first of all, they give one instruction at a time, and then as they get better at it, they can give a whole sequence of instructions. This is a video here that you'll have a link to later on, where two children are giving each other instructions to move an object around the mat. And when it comes to evaluation, so child A gave a route, gave an instruction, and child B, who was meant to be following the instructions, said, no, it should be green, green, green. So they were able to evaluate between them which was the best route, because both routes got to where they intended. So a good bit of evaluation for them there. So that's just a couple of those unplugged activities, those activities that involve no tech whatsoever. And I would say they're probably the most important, wouldn't you, Amanda? Probably the
Absolutely.
most important activities that we do in our early years. But I do like a little bit of tech. I like my toys. And last year developed ways of storytelling using technology. So that's what I've got for you now. If you've come across these Easy Speak microphones, they are great for getting children to speak, to use their language. Really simple. They press the record button to record, and they press the play button to hear back what they have spoken. I found that the lack of screen actually meant better quality talk from the children, and the quieter children enjoyed having their voice heard, because you can just unplug the bottom of it, plug it into your laptop, and you can hear, you can share with the whole class the audio file, or you can delete it. I say they were a bit fiddly to start with. We get a lot of it's not working recorded, but then you can see here children were recording stories for one another. They were interviewing one another about what they found in forest school, or they were just speaking into it, their observations, what they were seeing in our curiosity cube or on the science table. So lots of that talking. The technology was really encouraging them to use their language. Now, Chatpix is a free app. So if you have tablet devices, I talk a lot about Chatpix. I think it's great for getting children talking and storytelling. At first, when children are faced with that countdown, so that they take a photograph to make the object talk, or in this example here, it's to make their robot painting talk. And when faced with that 3, 2, 1, record, you've got silence. But eventually they did get better at remembering what they wanted to say and speak, and some of them use singing to make their recordings longer. You can then download those short video clips from the app, and you can QR code them as I've done here, and then the children could take their iPad to the wall, scan the QR code, and they could hear each other's Chatpixes, which were basically their robot paintings talking, which they found great fun. And the more we did it, the first time we did it, it was quite adult intensive, but the more we did it, the quicker they got. And actually, the more discerning they got as well. They decided, no, they didn't like that, they were going to re-record it. So lots of evaluation going on there as well. Now, ozobot is one of my favourite little toys. You can see there, tiny little robot. It's the kind of take a line for a walk activity, getting children mark making. You're coding it with felt tip pens, basically. You're telling it where to go with felt tip pens. And we've used this a lot in storytelling. And you can see here, children really engaged. They really wanted to get their ozobot, which was Jack, from Jack's cottage to the castle at the top of the beanstalk. So they were drawing all sorts of different beanstalk lines to get their ozobot to follow it. Now, when ozobot goes over a green line, his light goes green. When he goes over a red line, his light is red. You can use these devices right up into Key Stage 2 because you can start to put in coloured code. So red, green, red might speed up the motors on the ozobot, or red, blue makes it turn round, do 180-degree turn. But this child here was just investigating what colours he could turn the ozobot's lights. So you can see he's worked along the line, colouring it different colours, and it's just testing out to see what colours he could make the light turn into. But lots and lots of storytelling naturally came out of that as children were creating scenarios here for the ozobot pirate to get to the treasure. Oh, it's got stuck in the mud. Or, oh no, the crocodile's coming. That sort of thing was going on a lot there with ozobot. I also love Cubetto. Here is my Cubetto dressed up as a spider. Really easy to dress it up because it's a wooden box and you stick the costume to it with a bit of blue tack. I prefer Cubetto to Bebots because the code you can actually see on the coding board here. And so if there is a problem, then children can take off the little coloured blocks, the plastic blocks that they use, and replace them so they can be debugging their algorithm. But here you can see it dressed up as a rabbit, dressed up as a rocket, and say the spider. When it was dressed up as a rocket, it does move very, very slowly, which does frustrate some children. But also, I think for early years, it is brilliant that it moves so slowly. Okay, so when it comes to thinking about giving clear instructions, clear sequence of instructions, this is a really good progression from that twist-o-mat activity with the coloured dots to the code blocks for Cubetto. Okay. There are other tools that you can explore for storytelling. Anything that records children's voices basically is going to encourage them to develop that language, develop that storytelling. But none of these resources are going to be any good if you just give them to children. You have to do that modelling. And I think the rechargeable mobile phones are one of those resources which, you know, look great. And at first I thought, yeah, but they don't use them properly. They just press all the buttons and they're not using them effectively. But once we've done some work on different robots and how robots work and how we can talk to each other using these phones, they really started to get the idea that they wanted to talk to the person with the orange phone, they press the orange button and so on. So you do have to do a bit of modelling, a bit of small group work, and then making sure these resources are available for them to play with afterwards. And as Amanda said, you know, you can't be in early years and not find stories and books to support what you're doing. And these are my favourite storybooks. I've just come across another one that I need to add to my list. This is How to Code a Sandcastle. This is going to be great in the summer term, Amanda. Really lovely for...
I'm writing it down, Rachel.
For getting children to think about a sequence of code to building a sandcastle, or whatever it is they want to make in the sand tray. And again, that's not just exclusive to early years either, because it introduces repetition and loops and all that sort of jazz that you can do in Key Stage 1 and 2 with them. But storybooks are a great starting point for children, and I think particularly when you're talking about robots, to be having robot stories, you can do it as a whole topic, or you can do it as talking toys, whatever you like there. But Rusty the Squeaky Robot is also brilliant for PSED. So that's what I would certainly recommend. And then I have my final slide there. If you are local to Hertfordshire, to the University of Hertfordshire, and want to become part of a network of early years teachers who are going to explore how we can foster children's understanding of this technologically diverse world, then do join me, or look at joining me on that course in the spring term. It runs for the whole of the spring term. And the link is on the slides, which I understand you'll have a PDF of at the end of this. So thank you very much. Over to you, Alison.
Oh, thank you. I love the idea with Twister. That is brilliant. I'm going to use that. Can I suggest another book as well? There's a Pete the Cat book called Pete and the Robo Cat, which is another great one for coding as well. Well, have we got any questions?
We haven't actually, but if anyone would like to ask any, there is still a little bit of time, so please do pop them into the question window.
I'd love to ask one if that's okay. Amanda and Rachel, what would you never be without in nursery for teaching computational thinking? So a piece of equipment that you would always have in your setting, you know, whether it's in continuous provision or just something you would never be without if you wanted to teach computational thinking. I don't mind who goes first.
Do you want to go, Rachel?
I'm struggling to think, because I think computational thinking, a lot of it comes out of, you know, when they're building with bricks and Lego, or when they're, you know, getting ready for home time, all that sort of thing. So perhaps my digital camera, actually, and a way to take photographs of the children doing things which we can then talk about and sequence afterwards. But I don't think there's a quick one. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit of a tricky question, isn't it? But I love, yeah, digital cameras, so then you can show everybody, can't you, what you've been doing. Amanda?
I think that in a sense, the beauty of the question is that there isn't an answer, because actually, I could do it with a pile of sticks. It doesn't matter. You can apply it quite literally to anything, anywhere within the early. It's already inbuilt into the curriculum. We just didn't know it. So it's absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's right, isn't it? As early years teachers, I don't think we realised that we're actually doing computational thinking all the time, with everything we do naturally in our setting. You know, it's just there, isn't it? It's just there. And I wondered if either of you use the Codapillar. What do you think of the Codapillar for? Do you like?
Yeah, I love it. Use it a lot, and I think it's a really good link between the physical. You know, this is a block of code that you're sticking onto the caterpillar to make it longer, to the more abstract on-screen code, or this sort of abstract code here for Cubetto. So yeah, I often start with a Codapillar.
Yeah, we start with a Codapillar in nursery, I have to say, and then I do like the Cubetto. We tend to keep that for reception. I agree with you, Rachel, about the B-bots. We tend to leave those for Key Stage 1, actually. There's an awful lot of thinking has to go on in the little minds to do that. Thank you very much. Any other questions popped up, Will? Or?
Yeah, we have got a really good question here, which is from Stacey, who says, I'm not an EYFS practitioner, but I want to support the team in that phase. Could you tell me some more about how you introduce the book of robots and then link it to computing?
So the robot books, the robot stories, I use those as sort of starting points for, you know, well, what is a robot? What do we think a robot does? And we have our Rusty the Robot. We talk about robots needing instructions, clear sequence of instructions. And then we do the twister mat activities where they pretend to be the robot and somebody, the programmer, is giving them the instructions to move from A to B. Now that robot might be a rocket to get from Earth to Moon. It might be a robot dog to find its lost bone, that sort of activity. And then introducing the physical robots like Ozobot and Cubetto. I think that's it in a nutshell, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rachel. Okay, well, I think we're nearly running out of time now. So I think we'll draw this to a close. Thank you so much, Amanda and Rachel, for joining us today. It's been absolutely brilliant, and for all our attendees as well. Thank you. Can I encourage you please to share your personal highlights from today's session via social media and using the hashtag CAS Inspire? That would be great. Thank you. There will be a short survey on screen at the end of the webinar, and if you could complete that, again, we'd be very grateful. Continue to spread the word about CAS Inspire, and we're hosting further CAS Inspire sessions all the way through into 2022. Next Wednesday, we've got our final primary CAS Inspire session for this year, where we'll be exploring Scratch. I think that should be compulsory for every teacher. Scratch is a wonderful thing. So thank you for joining us, and really hope to see you next time. Have a good evening and goodbye, everybody.